From having no legal know-how to winning at the Supreme Court, three women from Scotland with no political background at all, they managed to change the gender ruling after judges last week unanimously agreed that a woman is defined as a biological female.
It is a move that this morning has been condemned by a group of doctors at the British Medical Association who say it's scientifically illiterate and biologically nonsensical. It also, of course, has left lots of people wondering which toilet they're supposed to use, a point we put to the leader of the Tory party, Kemi Badenoch, yesterday. Have we got that clip? Sure. We will find that and put it and show it to you right now. Would you say trans people now need their own facilities?
Most, if not all organisations have a way of dealing with this. Not having gender-neutral loos is one of the easiest things that you can do. Almost all businesses I see have disabled loos. They are unisex, different from gender-neutral. Trans people can use those. But if you are providing a single-sex space, it has to be a single-sex space. And the Supreme Court has said, as I always had, that sex is biological. It is biological.
What does it mean for single-sex spaces? We will ask two of the campaigners, Susan Smith and Marion Calder from For Women Scotland, in just a moment. But first, here's Ciara Durkin with the story of their campaign.
A landmark ruling from the UK's highest court. Three Scottish women with no political or legal background took their own government to the Supreme Court and won. It began on Mumsnet, where they connected over their shared concern of gender ideology, later starting the campaign group For Women Scotland. Wanting clarification over whether the Equality Act says that a trans woman with a gender recognition certificate is entitled to the same sex-based protections in law as someone born female. They used free sausage rolls to entice politicians to meetings, arguing that sex-based protections should only apply to women born female. When this was rejected by the Scottish court, they were allowed to appeal. Their campaign was met with significant resistance, but also support, to the tune of £70,000 from J.K. Rowling. And earlier this month, they settled a debate that had stumped politicians for years. How does the law define a woman? The ruling confirms it's a biological female. Recent guidance also states women's bathrooms are for biological women only. Despite their jubilant mood at the ruling, campaigners say they have been inundated with abuse and even death threats. But that won't stop them from celebrating.
Joining us now are two of the women who won their Supreme Court battle. Marion Calder is in Edinburgh. Susan Smith is with us in the studio. Susan, it was a long, hard struggle, and you faced huge opposition, and actually in Scotland, from all the big political parties. There must be, for you, kind of a sense of relief, of vindication. You won.
Yes, because initially it was very difficult to get anybody to listen to us. And we started out, we were very fortunate that we had some politicians like Joe McAlpine and Joanne Lamont in Scottish Labour who understood the concerns because they'd been feminist campaigners for a very long time. And so that gave us a bit of legitimacy, I suppose, but then we were still ranged against most of the establishment in Scotland, and especially Nicola Sturgeon, who is very committed to pushing this through at all costs.
And the striking thing is about what's happened since is on one level, it's now clear. It's clear that in the Equalities Act, it's biological sex, which is the defining thing. But of course, then, as we've just been discussing, it leads to lots of questions and confusion because not everybody kind of quite fits in how they live their lives to that supposed clarity.
Yeah, and I think there's been an issue with the sort of information people have been given over the last 10 years by campaign groups who went far beyond the law and told people that they were entitled to enter opposite sex spaces. And that was deliberate, I think, because they were trying to change the law and they wanted to present a situation where they could say, but nobody knows where they should go. It's all terribly confusing. Let's just scrap all of this. And really, we believe that the law was always very clear, that this was always because how else can you define sex? It's too difficult to define sex in any other way, and it was protected. Gender reassignments also protected, so that's something different. And I think time would have been better spent 10 years ago working out what sort of facilities and spaces were needed for those people, rather than trying to take those facilities and spaces off women.
Marion, yesterday on Lorraine's show, she spoke to a lovely couple who feel, devastated by the result. Let's just have a listen to what they told her.
These guidelines now say that I am not allowed to use a men's toilet or facility because obviously I'm not a biological man. But these guidelines also helpfully say that I'm not allowed to use the women's toilets either. And when I'm out with our 2 little daughters, what am I supposed to tell our 2 little girls? I'm sorry, Daddy can't take you to the men's room because the government says he can't. And Daddy actually also can't take you to the ladies' one because Daddy isn't allowed to go into either because the people that run this country have said so.
So, Marion, what would you say to Jake Graff, who biologically born a woman, but clearly now a trans man, and what toilet that person is, he's supposed to use? Because, if he goes into a single-sex women's space, he's clearly going to get challenged.
Well, as much as I have sympathy for is it Jake?
Jake, yeah.
I think turning it back to toilets is still the kind of the thin wedge, because we went to court to actually protect Jake's rights for maternity and pregnancy and breastfeeding. If we hadn't actually won, Jake wouldn't have actually had those rights. So as much as it keeps getting turned back to toilets, and I think we have to wait for the full EHRC guidance to come up on that one. That's not for myself to comment on. We were just taking a Supreme Court case. We don't really want to get into legalities of another case so quickly.
That is true, although, Marion, the reality is this is about how people live their lives. And I think your argument was always it's common sense. And in so many cases, it is common sense. But in Jake's case, Jake, who is clearly transitioned, a man with a beard, to all intents and purposes, that's what I would see. If Jake walked into a women's toilet, I would expect you to say he shouldn't be there. Are you now saying he should be there?
He should be there because Jake is actually female, and Jake could actually prove that he is female.
Yeah, but to me, that is not common sense anymore. At that point, you've left common sense behind. I think our viewers will look at that and think, well, hang on a sec, he may have been born a woman, but now, in his life, he's a man. I'm not sure I would want my daughters in a toilet with somebody with a beard walking in who is a man. I would think, well, are they safe?
Well, I think Jake actually is an outlier in this case, but law can't actually legislate for outliers. The vast majority of people that, no matter how they identify, do actually look like the biological sex they were born as.
Doesn't the law have to doesn't the law have to legislate for every case? That's the whole point. The law has to apply to all of us fairly.
Well, it legislates for majority, because otherwise, how do we then end up with females like Jake? We'd end up being in the male prison. Would we want that?
Yeah, I mean, the trouble is every single politician seems to be saying this has provided clarity, Susan, but it hasn't provided clarity, has it? Because, as we say, it's the outliers, which appear to be outliers, but actually that is where there is still confusion.
And Marion say there can't be clarity. I mean, that's our argument, isn't it?
Yeah, so Susan, obviously a victory for you as campaigners, but where do we go now? Do you just stand down and allow other institutions to work out how this applies in practice?
No, I mean, there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of policy work to do, sorting things out. And there does need to be consideration of how certain individuals are treated on an individual basis. But I think the point is generally we do legislate for society rather than the individual, and that's fair. And someone like Jake, I mean, I think quite possibly you're not going to challenge him in the men's toilets, so maybe just carries on doing that. But the point is, were Jake to be convicted of crime, the prison service would never have put somebody like that in a male prison because it's too dangerous. So that's, that people who are in that situation need that biological sex protection as well, even if they think they don't. And I think, you know, going forward, we're going to have to look at policies. Overall, policies will have to look at how they treat people on the basis of biological sex and protect those spaces, but perhaps have some leeway for providing additional services for individuals.
Yeah.
That's really
OK.
interesting.
Susan Smith and Marion Calder, thank you very much, both of you, for joining us this morning.
And congratulations.
Thank you.